Today, we are going to read the article on Inuit housing. I will read over the green, blue, and black diamond. So let's begin. Inuit housing, historical from 500 BC to 1940 AD. Until the 1940s, most Inuit lived in dwellings or houses made from natural resources available to them and built to meet their nomadic or traveling seasonal way of life. This architecture or design involved small houses that were portable and easy to put up and take down, such as skin tents and houses made from sod or grass, snow, and driftwood. The construction materials, size of houses, and a large number of people who lived in them meant that it was hard to keep the house clean and germ free. Once someone got sick in the small house, it spread easily to the rest of the family, like colds, flus, and other viruses. So that is source one. Source two. The typical materials for making homes, such as wood and mud, are hard to find in the frozen tundra of the Arctic. The Inuit learned to make warm homes out of snow and ice for the winter. During the summer, they would make homes from animal skins stretched over a frame made from driftwood or whale bones. The Inuit word for home is igloo. So, igloo just means a home, not necessarily a building made out of snow and ice like we know it today. Settlements and housing. The Inuit were nomadic people, so they rarely stayed in one place for very long. Therefore, their houses had to be quick and easy to build. During the summer, the Inuit built tents out of driftwood or poles covered with animal skins, mostly caribou or seal skins. These tents were not unlike the plains teepees. A ring of boulders around the base held down the tent skin covering. Since wood was so hard to come by, the wooden poles used to make the tents were rare and protected by the families. People from different areas would form larger villages during the summer. In the winter, everyone scattered across the land into small groups again. During the winter, Inuit families would follow the hunt. They needed a shelter that would keep them warm and protect them from harsh winter weather. The most common winter shelter was a snow house, more commonly known as an igloo. The igloo. An igloo was a temporary, dome shaped shelter made out of snow blocks. The blocks were cut from the snow and piled into spiral shaped, leaning in slightly. This gave the igloo its dome shape. Soft snow was used to fill any holes and added extra insulation. Depending on the size of the igloo, it usually took Inuit 20 to 30 minutes to build. Larger, more permanent igloos could reach 4 meters in diameter and 3 meters tall. Sleeping platforms were made of ice blocks covered with fur. And here are some pictures. So you can see they're filling in the size of it, and you can see what a village would look like by the artists. And then these are more of the summer type shaped structures. Alrighty, and there is a wigwam. So sometimes bigger, sometimes not bigger. This would be more from later times when researchers or explorers would bring things, or when people would just find things that wash up on shore. You might get lucky and find a door or a window. All right. Blue square people, here we go. In the 1940s, so this will take you from the 1940s up to more current. In the 1940s, visiting and workers from missionaries, Hudson Bay Company, and Royal Canadian Mounted Police created chances for the Inuit to see food, clothing, transportation, technology, medical facilities, and schools. Because of these things, Many Inuit made regular trips to these posts as part of their seasonal traveling, making workers aware of Inuit housing conditions. The government continued to help protect traditional Inuit housing until 1950. Yet, by then, the increasing visits from Inuit at government posts, criticism from the American defense personnel who were working in the area about Inuit health and housing, concerns over Canadian ownership of the North, and difficulties in getting health care and welfare to spread out Inuit populations led to the Canadian government starting to start the Inuit housing programs. During the mid 20th century, so 1950s, housing was part of the Canadian government's Northern Vision, which wanted to develop the entire North, including mining and drilling non-renewable resources like oil and oil shale and coal, and making sure the North had a say in the government and was its own territory. So, question, what do you feel was the driving or main reason the government decided to help the Inuit? Was it pressure from the US? Was it pressure from the Inuit? Or from the idea of developing the North for mining and oil? Next section. What the federal government planned for the Inuit housing involved designing and testing homes that fit the federal government's budget and included characteristics appropriate to the traditional Inuit way of life, such as portability, moving it, low cost, and heat efficiency, keeping heat in. Housing designs selected for use in the north, which was hard because of the transportation difficulties, it was hard to get vehicles there, including few roads, because why would you build a road if vehicles didn't go on it, and a lack of airport runways, roads, gas stations, or electricity. Also, the high cost of getting building materials like wood, aluminum, steel, and insulation fabric, and the fuel needed to heat the homes were all problems for the government. When you see these notes, you could actually click on it and it'll take you to the actual article where some of this information is from. So, question, what is another problem you could think of with the government plan? Pause here and think about that. What's another problem that the government should have thought of? Okay. Experiments in designing Inuit-style housing were discontinued during the 1950s as more Inuit became more likely to stay in one town instead of moving around. They also were upset that the government workers, the construction workers who built the houses, and the police had nicer houses, which were much bigger and made of more high quality than the new Inuit housing. To address these concerns, in 1959, the Department of Northern Affairs and National Resources created a new Inuit housing program called the Eskimo Housing Loan Program. Although this would create 1,200 houses, they did not research and plan for the problems houses in the North would need. The houses, called matchbox structures, were designed and tested in Ottawa, where it's not cold all the time, and therefore they did not have the things needed for the Inuit culture, like providing indoor space to cut seal meat, because they hunted a lot. The goal of the program was to provide Inuit with okay-sized homes that could be affordably heated. So the bigger the home, the more it costs to heat. Both the cost of the houses and the cost of heating the houses were much too expensive for most Inuit, and many could not make payments each month. For most Inuit families, these homes were too small and not constructed to last in the northern climate. In the early 1960s, the government developed a new program with rentals. Since Inuit did not understand economy of the South, because remember, they were doing bartering, they were not in capitalist society. The new program included housing, fuel, electricity, and furniture. So they included all that in the price. As more Inuit moved to communities from the land, overcrowding in government housing became a concern. During the 1960s, the federal government's goal was for all Inuit to have housing within communities by 1971. Inuit were required to participate in a 4-stage adult education program designed to assist Inuit in adjusting to life in their new homes. Because think about that, they don't even know what it's like to live in a house or what the problems are with a house. They don't know about electricity. They don't know how you fuel a house. They don't know about furniture. All these things they have to learn. And there's very little education for them. So they actually had programs to help the Inuit learn about living in a Southern style society. During the 1960s, the Inuit increasingly settled or stayed in permanent communities throughout the North. So they stopped traveling all the time, using the federal government's housing initiatives to rent or purchase homes. Community residents allowed children to even go to school while living with their parents, rather than in a residential school where they have to live there or a hostel, and ensured that Inuit had access to medical and other social services provided in the communities. This led to drastic changes in their lifestyle and new health problems. Eating different kinds of foods like sugar leads to diabetes. Chronic unemployment, unable to find a job for the Inuit who settled in the communities, led to an increase in other social problems, including depression. Historically, the construction of homes in the North has been affected by the high cost of transporting construction materials north, extreme harsh weather conditions, the short construction season, you could only build while it's warm, and the small number of people experienced or trained in construction who are available for these projects. Black diamond time. So that sets up the problem. Now we're going to talk about other parts of this problem. In modern times, the high cost availability, the high cost of construction in the North make it very difficult for many Inuit wishing to purchase homes or to build their own homes. So many Inuit rent homes and pay rent on a sliding scale, and monthly costs for utilities are included in the rent or subsidized, which means the government gives them a discount or pays a certain portion of that. High rates of unemployment in northern communities mean that families cannot afford to buy a house or pay full rents or cost of utilities, causing long waiting lists for government-paid housing. So the government gives you a house, but there are very few available, and there's a lot more Inuit. So if you don't want to wait for your house on a long waiting list, you have to figure out how you could buy your own house. Very difficult for people that don't have a lot of job opportunities. In addition, the building of homes in the North was never keeping pace with rapid population growth. So in other words, more people were moving to the North and more people were having babies, and they weren't building enough houses to keep up with that. So that further added to a long waiting list for government housing. Housing construction in Labrador Inuit communities has caused similar concerns, as houses built in the 60s and 70s were flawed in their designs and could not withstand the northern climate. Without major renovations, many of these houses lasted only 20 years. Imagine your house only lasts 20 years. In America, you have a mortgage for 30 years. You're paying for it. That would be a disaster. In 1977, there were 13 Inuit communities in northern Quebec. A survey of housing conducted for the federal government determined that homes in many of these communities did not have electricity or systems for sewage disposal for your toilets. They didn't even have indoor plumbing or running water. So the government houses were not great. Additionally, a significant number of the homes were considered overcrowded, and many homes needed to be replaced. In the community of Aklavik, all homes were required to be knocked down and rebuilt because the design and quality was so low. Housing design. The housing designs and division of space, like rooms, in early Inuit homes were based on patterns of family activity common to southern Canada and did not necessarily reflect Inuit needs for activities such as preparing foods together, repairing hunting and transportation equipment, and entertainment. Boiling, for example, was a common method of Inuit food preparation. So they boiled a lot of their food, and it created high levels of condensation in the homes. So the boiling turns water into vapor, and when it hits colder surfaces, it has condensation. It collects water and then starts to leak or rain inside of your house. This led to iced over windows, warped floors, and warped walls because of all the water moisture in the house. Federal housing administrators voiced concerns about hygiene and maintenance based on Inuit use of rooms and amenities within their homes. So the federal administrators were like, they don't even use their rooms right. It's disgusting. But they didn't understand Inuit housing because Inuits were using their bathtub to store their fresh meat. They didn't take baths like Southern groups did. Instead, they used that to store meat because there was no storage space. And they used the kitchens and living rooms to kill animals because there was no section in the house for killing or taking apart the animals to make food. They didn't have a space for preparing hides or maintaining their boat or motors. In 2003, in a 2003 study, Inuit homes demonstrated the need to create Inuit-specific housing designs that recognize the significance of maintaining extended family cohesion. In other words, they have much bigger extended families. You might live with your aunt and uncle. Your grandparents live with you, and they didn't have the right rooms for that. Through the use of large spaces for both shared and individual activities, so they needed bigger spaces so everyone could meet together and do activities together and eat together. Such ideals of space usage encourage traditional cultural values of family solidarity or being together, reciprocal assistance, which means helping each other, and traditional renewable sources harvesting activities. So taking out seeds and planting them together, or using different things together to work on traps or hunting equipment together. Through his field work, Dawson recorded Inuit concerns about housing designs, including lots of small rooms, no storage space. They didn't like multi-story buildings that were high up, and the failure of houses to stand up to cold climate conditions. So this house room problem is big. They don't want small little rooms where everyone's by themselves. They want big rooms where everyone's together. And they need storage space where they could keep animal meat. So they didn't have those kind of things built in. Through the national energy crisis of the late 1970s, plans for the construction of new houses were redesigned again to increase their energy efficiency by adding porches to major home entrances, triple glazing windows so they wouldn't leak cold air, making most windows face south when they always have sun, and creating unheated food storage areas and garage areas. Less heat escaped from the homes, and space within the homes was increasingly responsive to their lifestyle. So it was better for their lifestyle. It allowed the heat to stay in better. It was more energy efficient. Since the cost to heat homes could be as high as $7,000 a year, people could not actually afford a mortgage on a house and to heat the house. So they were forced again into renting. And again, rental waiting lists for public housing could be 13 or 14 years long wait in some communities. So you would get a place and your kid, you were pregnant, you would get your name on the list. And by the time your kid was 14, you would finally get a house. So they have their own room. According to a 1994 report by the Paktoti, the National Inuit Women's Organization, an Inuit specific housing policy is required to provide Inuit with standards of housing common to other Canadians. So they put in a report saying they needed to have housing like all other Canadians had. And the impact was causing problems for women. Overcrowded housing, homes that lack basic amenities like sinks, water, toilets, showers, and homes in poor repair or poor condition have contributed to housing crisis that impacts on Inuits women's health, their safety, their education, their economic status, their employment and business development opportunities, and interactions with the justice system. Similarly, overcrowding does not permit places for quiet study, which negatively affects school performance and is linked to high dropout rates. So we know, or we should know, that if you have a quiet place in your house with a surface to study on, that helps you be able to do your homework and read. And if you have a place that's full with 3 families living in it, it's really hard to find a quiet place to sit. Inuit specific housing also incorporates housing designs that reflect Inuit patterns and preferences for spatial use. These preferences include fewer rooms divided up and larger rooms with bigger windows and openings with increased space available for socializing and group activities. So you don't want 5 small little rooms. You'd rather have 2 small rooms and a big space where you could have people over to talk and hang out together, such as preparing traditional meat, sewing, like making quilts and clothes, and other crafts, repairing small engines, and just playing with children. Children need space to run around. Ongoing concerns. Overcrowding in northern homes is a persistent problem, constant problem for Inuit families. Similarly, the construction of new homes and repairs to existing homes has not kept pace with the population growth of the communities. So the buildings weren't good. They keep falling apart. You keep having to fix them. And that keeps taking away freedom of people to do other things like get a job or work or go to school because you have to keep fixing things. In a publication in 2005, The Well-Being of Inuit Communities in Canada, Inuit lack the amount of houses more often than the quality of the houses. The lack of housing, in particular, the lack of affordable housing, often means that Inuit families are doubling or tripling up in a single family house. So 3 families could live in one family house that wasn't very good in the first place. This stress on the home is as much of a concern for the physical structure because it's not designed to have that many families and wear and tear, as well as the limits of the lifespan of the building. And it requires more repairs more often. Such living arrangements also negatively impact on any social concerns that exist within a household, such as stress generated by unemployment or overcrowding. If you've ever had a family move in with you, or you had to live with a family for a little while, you know how difficult it is to have 2 families living in one house. It's just crowded. Don't have your privacy. There's a lot of noise. It's stressful. Also, there's the factor of disease spreading, like tuberculosis, bacteria, and E. coli. So, like I talked about before, if one person gets the flu, that spreads through the house. If there are 10 people living there, that means 10 people could get sick. There is federal responsibility to provide housing for Inuit under Section 9124 of the Canadian Constitution, as well as within the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement and the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. Since 1993, the federal government has continued to participate on reserve housing for Aboriginal people, other tribes, yet has not funded similar programs for the Inuit. So the Canadian government has given more funds and preference to other groups like East Coastal or Plains or Northwest Coastal tribes. So the Inuit have been getting left out on those things. All right. I hope you enjoyed your performance reading of the article. Have a great day. Bye bye.